Again, thanks so much, everybody, for being here, and for our folks online. It's, again, just so great to be back in person, and wonderful to be here with all of you. Thanks, Steve, for moderating, and all of the fellow leaders from the program. So I'm actually an alum of UW River Falls, and I graduated in 2004. And my time here on campus has really served me well in my really diverse career in dairy. And so I just wanted to plug the university and just say it's nice to be back. Today I'm joined by two fellow alumni and Dr. Jill, who's faculty here. And before, we're gonna get into the history of this group, but before we do that, I wanna tell a little story. Part of the reason why I feel so privileged to be here with these folks. So it was June of 2017, and I see some other folks in the room who are gonna remember this story. Greg Steele here from Compier. So it's June of 2017. At the time, I'm working for Dairy Business Association, and together with a colleague, we traveled to Baldwin to the Compier Financial Office to meet with a group of farmers who were concerned about water quality in their area. And they, at that time, the farmer-led movement, the farmer-led group movement was kind of just getting started. There'd been a few rounds of DAT-CAP grants, and they were seeing some other things going on in the state, and they really wanted to play a role in solutions for their area. And so they invited me and a colleague of mine to come up and just sort of have an informal chat about, what would it look like if we organized into a group in one of these farmer-led groups. And oh, by the way, we have some research ideas that involve the university. And so we kind of got those conversations going. So I was really proud to be able to work with Greg and his neighbors, Todd Dornick. Dean is here in the audience, Tom Zwald, Leslie Sacchina, and others. So again, our folks here today are from the Western Wisconsin Conservation Council. And together with Jill Coleman Wasik, who's faculty in plant and earth science, they are working on a multi-year study funded by themselves, as well as the Dairy Innovation Hub and other groups, really trying to connect land use practices and education and kind of outcomes on the land. And we'll talk more about that, but I wanted to provide that background for everybody. So with that, I'm gonna have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the discussion. Greg, let's start with you.
Testing. My name is Greg Friendshuh. I am a dairy farmer up in Clear Lake. We, with my family, I manage the dairy. We have about 1,300 cows and a mob of young stock, and we farm about 3,500 acres. I am a River Falls graduate. It took me 19 years to complete my degree, but I made it. And I'm our purpose, or we're concentrating our efforts towards water quality and sustainable ag out in the fields. And given the responsibility that I have with all the manure and the fertilizers that we use, it interests me to be in the conversations of new and innovative ways to steward our resources. So that's why I'm here, tremendously honored. And Dr. Jill, if would be next.
Test. So I'm going to try and jam this into my mask. I apologize. I'm a little sick today, so I'm trying to keep you all safe here. I'm Dr. Jill Coleman Wasik. I teach environmental science courses in the Plant and Earth Science Department. I've been teaching on campus here since 2013, and I've been working with WWCC since fall 2017. Yeah. They tracked me down through some different connections that had been made in the past, and we worked out an amazing plan, and it was. I mean, I could not believe how fortunate I was as a faculty member to just almost have this amazing opportunity land in my lap. And they approached and said, would you be willing to to help us out and be kind of an unbiased third party in this research idea that we have. And I was like, of course I will. Are you kidding me? This is amazing. I absolutely want to be involved in this. So that was the beginning of what's developed in the what I think is a really amazing relationship, and is one of my favorite parts of my position here.
My name is David Tollberg. I'm a graduate of River Falls in 1980, which puts me a while back. It's fun to be here. It's fun to come back. It's fun to be a part of this. I'm a private crop consultant. I've been owning my own company since 1994. I do a lot of consulting for large dairies, some small dairies. I consult crop farmers as well, a lot in western Wisconsin, some in Minnesota as well. So I see a lot, see thousands of acres, and again, my company's Northland Crop Consulting.
Great. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the partnership with UW River Falls. And this is sort of towards all of you, but how did you come to work together, and what are some of the things that you are doing together involving the university and the WWCC?
So just to put a plug in and pave the way for that conversation. So on the other side of the state, there's water quality issues. And part of the conversation that we had initially, our first meeting was to address or to monitor our water quality and try to measure what kind of impacts that our operations are having on that. So anyway, that's what drove us to find Dr. Jill. And go ahead, Dr. Jill.
Yeah, so the initial work that we started really began in the spring of 2018. So we had some planning that started in fall of 2017 into winter of 2018. And so my research group has been monitoring mostly nitrate concentrations, a few other parameters in well water in WWCC member wells. All of the wells that are located on member properties, we visit those between 1 and 4 times per year, depending on the results. So our activities are informed by the results that we're getting. So we kind of have an adaptive approach to our sampling. So that's been kind of the core of our work together. But WWCC is so proactive, progressive sort of group, thinking about what can we be doing, how do we continue to engage our members and attract new members. So in talking with folks over the years, we've developed a few other ideas to continue building out this sort of research program. So the DIH fellowship that I have is centered around a lysimeter project, and lysimeters are basically soil water collectors that we install in the soil profile, and they allow us to sample the different constituents that are in the soil water, kind of sitting there waiting perhaps to move down into groundwater sources. So since our well testing program is so focused on nitrate in groundwater, we're interested in knowing what is the water that's moving from surface into subsurface carrying, and is that a potential source of that nitrate into groundwater? So we did a pilot lysimeter study, I think, in the summer of 2019, if I'm remembering right, and the results from that were really intriguing, and so we built that out with Dairy Innovation Hub support, starting in the summer of 2020, which was, honestly, just not a great time to start a research project with campus shut down by COVID. And then 2 years of drought subsequent to that. So it's been a bit of a challenge, but I think that we're starting to finally see some results from that project as well. We've had other ideas that we've been floating around, that we're still kind of navigating. How would we carry these out? Things that are associated with some of the other research that's going on through, hub funding, things like, biochar amendments to soils, and I think some of the new faculty that have come on board are also really interested in working with this. I just talk you guys up all the time in my department and across my college, so just get ready. Yeah.
So as I said before, the main objective of the WWCC from the beginning was really to quantify the connection between land use practices and groundwater quality. And then really take that information to help educate farmers. So I'd love to know from Greg and Dave, how's that farmer education going? People seem like they're receptive?
Yeah, for me, I'm all about data as a consultant. It's all bring me data, and I don't necessarily like testimonials, but give me data and give me long-term data. And that's what's great about this, is we're going to have long-term data because, in the 2 years of drought, you have anomalies. So that's not good data, but it's part of the data. It's not the whole story. It's part of the story. What I'm excited about this is we can come into something, create long-term. And as Dr. Jill and I, we were talking about even the variations within St. Croix County. So we can determine where are some of our really sensitive areas, or where are some of the areas that are not sensitive, that what we're doing is good, or how can we, tweak some of what we're doing to make sure that we get good data. And I'm just a strong believer that when farmers see the data, they make good decisions. They want to know the facts, though, too. So they're all for clean water. They just want to know that this is good data. And so this partnership, I think, is pretty amazing, that we can actually get local, good data, and we can create a long-term study that's going to get that. I'm looking forward to seeing this branch out into more. So the more studies, the more data we can get, the better decisions that we can make.
So back to one of the main parts of our vision or mission of our group is to try to preserve our family farming, the dairy sector in particular. In our part of the country, and I lost my train of thought there, I guess. But I wanted to say to what you were saying, Dave, is data. Oh, this is it. So we want to try to promote good practices that we find that will preserve that livelihood, and we're trying to spread that to neighbors. And it takes a long time to get people to convince trying different things. And so with the university, data, how do I preserve my income is the main thing on the minds of the producers out there. So having data that can show that this can work, and and the sacrifices aren't that great, or actually there are no sacrifices, there are benefits to the practices that these guys are trying. So the two research things that Dr. Jill is working on, we're expecting to be, or hoping that they'll be long term. The data that we're collecting during drought years, might be quality data. There's so many things to learn. This is, there's no end to what we have to learn yet. So going through these drought years, 10 years from now, and we look back, there might be data points that are very significant to what we're trying to do. So this is all so important to get some traction built for being mindful of stewarding our resources.
Yeah, and I think farmers understand too that their wells go into here too. They're drinking the same water, and this is that we can have good, profitable agriculture and clean water, I think, at the same time. It's not one or the other. How do we bring the science to that place where we're doing both really well? I think that's my job as a consultant, and that's what we're trying to work through with getting good data, working with Dr. Jill, and these projects are great.
And having been at some of your field days before, does it seem to you like farmers are, when they come and they see, do you think they're open to trying some of those things? Have you seen sort of behavior shift and practice shift?
I've been involved since the onset of this thing, and there's always been a little bit of interest in it, but we are gaining traction. My neighbors are trying new practices, and they watch my fields, and they, mine have good and bad. I'm learning. So
every farm does.
So that being said, there are things that are working, and my neighbors are going to be trying the same things. So yeah, I think we are gaining traction.
I think with the farmers that I work with, one of the things that I think about is moving the dial. We're maybe not moving it all the way over here, and that's maybe not the best thing for every farmer. but when they can see that something is working, or they also see that something is not working. We have big rain events, we have erosion problems where we have a lot of tillage. All of a sudden farmers go, I can't do this anymore. What can I do, or what little things or major things or minor things can I do to make this a better thing?
So shifting a little bit back to you, Dr. Jill, you touched a little bit on some of the research you've been doing. What are some of the things that you'd love to do, and how might the hub play a role in that? If you had a wish list, and again, there's new faculty in the room here, what might some of those future projects look like?
Well, I can tell you that, you know, some of the things that I am looking forward to in the coming year, I think it would be great to have more real-time sort of continuous data from some of these wells. So a little bit touching on your previous question too, some of the results that we've found from certain wells are very concerning. We've recorded, concentrations of nitrate in residential wells as high as 70 parts per million, and the health standard is 10. And it's not totally clear that the health standard is completely protective of people over long periods of time. There's some science that's come out from the Netherlands showing that perhaps even 10 parts per million isn't quite protective enough when you're drinking that source of water for decades. So, some of the members who have those results in their wells, they're very concerned with that. And those tend to be the wells we think that are in these areas that are more susceptible, more connected to the surface. And I think that more real-time data would be helpful in those situations if we could see kind of a direct connection with, say, rain events and changes in nitrate concentrations within those wells. Then perhaps we can do a better job of maybe figuring out the sources and where those connections are, and do a better job of protecting those areas specifically. My overall vision is also to provide more tailored recommendations to the producers, right? Because these are businesses, and so, best management practices, all of the best management practices that are out there, there are great reasons for using all of those best management practices. Our focus is on nitrate in groundwater, and so one of my goals is to figure out, do all of the fields need cover crops on them, and no-till and all of these things, or is that really the best strategy for certain places, and that we really need to support producers in these areas implementing those practices, and in some of these other areas, maybe it's buffer strips on the sides of their fields because most of the water is just kind of running off of the fields. How can we do a better job of making those recommendations so that people are able to decide what practices they're going to put in their fields that are going to have the biggest impact on the issues they're most concerned about? So
Yeah.
that's what I would say I could keep going, but I don't want to take up the entire time either. So.
From the farmer's perspective, I think that's great, because we can, instead of painting with a broad stroke, we can be a little more definitive of what we're doing. And here's a sensitive area. I better fix this, but here I'm okay, and I'm going to be fine doing it this way. I think for Dr. Jill, I think we were talking about some of the things I'd like to see her do. It's like, we've got so much good technology out there. We can use tensiometers and lysimeters that we can look at stuff with our phone now and get good data as how is our irrigation schedule working on the irrigated land. So there's just, I think, a big group of things that we could be doing as we look into this subject.
So another question that I had come up as we were preparing for today was the data and what you do with it, and do you share your data publicly, and if so, kind of how, and what has the public's response been, Greg, Dave, Jill, to this effort and the work that you're doing?
Well, I think that first off, the data is not available to anybody other than the people who own the well. So I can monitor my farm's water, and Dean can monitor his farm's water, and Jill can learn from the data. So, what was the second part of that?
What's public response? So
Oh,
when you have an event or put out a report or something to that effect, like what are your neighbors saying?
Well, I think just to remind our neighbors that we are concerned about it. We're the ones that have the responsibility of taking care of a lot of the things that could impact all of our water. So for them to know that we are putting energy towards it and are concerned about it, I think might comfort them quite a bit. So.
Yeah, I would agree. Some of the data you don't share, but some of it, I know there's a watershed up in Polk County that we've got some really good data on, and I know it's been shared within the watershed, and we're going to share it at another meeting, and all that's really good. And so maybe in agriculture, we're not as good sometimes as saying, hey, we're doing things to try to help our own industry. The general public needs to know that there's good things going on here too. And I think what we can share, we'll share. Just to know that the work is being done, I think is good, and the general public needs to know, and the farming community, the ag community needs to know as well.
I've presented our results at regional meetings, but every time I present results from WWCC, I remove all identifying information. So, if you look at some of the nitrate, well water data that's out there, you have township by township data that you can look at, and there's one of my challenges is to figure out how best to present the data so that people can see the broad picture of what's going on, but also while respecting the wishes of the farmer group, because I would never want to jeopardize their trust in the university as an unbiased partner.
As we transition to getting some Q&A from the audience here, can you give our listeners a sense of kind of the size of your group? Like roughly how many members can you recall sort of the acreage coverage? I just want folks to understand that it's not just 2 farms, it's a lot.
Greg, do you know how many members?
I
I
think
just
we've
know at
got-
the annual meeting we're full. I
Yeah,
mean, we're in a farmer's shed, and there it's a really nice area, and I don't know, we're there
Our annual
80 to
meetings will
100.
attract about this many
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
close to.
it will be. It will be a very large. It's probably one of the largest groups, farmer-led groups that I've ever been in. So, and
I don't know, Maria. Maybe you know more than 50, 60, I think, is around.
And how many sites are you monitoring? Do you know off the top of your head?
I want to say that our data set is something between, I want to say that we're actively monitoring wells on something between 45 and 50
Yeah.
member properties. Yeah, and we're coming in on close to 1,000 data points now. So
Right.
yeah.
So it's a pretty significant sort of regional impact and reach.
the other thing I'd say to that is there's a lot of large and small farmers combined. So it's
Right.
not just sometimes in groups, you'll get a lot of interested farmers who are in the smaller dairies. Greg's a large farmer. And both are needed. Actually, it's part of the whole. So there's a lot of acreages that I think are represented in this group.
Okay, so with that, thank you to our panelists. We have some time for Q&A. We have probably I would say, about 8 minutes for questions. So again, the room is open. We can run microphones to anyone wishing to ask a question. And we also have some questions online that we can take in a moment. Anyone in the room want to ask a question? Sure, go ahead.
I'm an engineer by training. And so I'm interested in precision agriculture, precision monitoring of crop yields and fertilizer application. So from all three of you, like, where are we in precision ag in terms of adopting it, in terms of, getting it out into the field, and what's the prospect, and particularly for improving water quality? What's the leverage we've got on precision ag?
Well, and that's part of what we do. We do a lot of precision ag. I can actually monitor combines while they're combining. I can get it into my software for farmers that want to share all that. We can geo-reference any plot that someone wants to do. We can mark it out, and then we can bring yield to that. So we're at kind of the beginning even of that. And we have to be careful that what's statistical and what isn't statistical. And that's a big thing for me too. But we've got some good demonstrations that are out there, and I think we can do more. One of the things I would like to see is, even if we have bigger plots of tilled, no-tilled, conventional tilled, all those, we can create that, but let's create long-term studies. So not just 1 year, but let's get more years, so we can do some of the tillage things. I think we could create some long-term nitrogen, studies with this too. Again, I'm always a little bit careful that we got to be statistically significant in how we're doing it, but we have a lot of tools available. I know even with Greg, as my company, we're doing some things with him and want to continue doing some things as we change practices. What does the combine see? So that's happening, and we're doing more.
And if I could add to that, I'm a farmer by trade, and when we get into the planting season and the sun comes out and things warm up and the soil hits 50 degrees, prior to that in the wintertime, Dave and I are talking about different trials that we can do and how we're going to do them. But as soon as that sun shines and the planter's supposed to hit the field, I'm out riding on planters and I'm trying to get things rolling. And all these things that we talk about go right out the window, and nothing gets done on my farm anyway. Maybe that's my shortcoming. But there are, by accident, some results that we get to see, and the technology is a huge tool for them. The long-term data, I go out to the university, and we're going to be asking for more help. Now that we've got introduced to Dr. Jill and the passion that she brings to it, there's field trials and things out there that I'm doing that I see my limited little trial on that I can use to present to my farmer friends and such, but to have the university have some professional trials, we're going to be coming out to you guys with more requests, and look forward to the relationships and hopefully to the research as well.
So I've got some online questions that we can get to here. So those farms that we talked about that had significant nitrate concentrations, what are some of the conservation practices that they might implement?
Well, I can tell you that at least 3 new wells have been drilled.
Sure.
So, which is not a conservation practice, right? It's something to stave off the problem for now, right? To get to a deeper aquifer where there's less contamination. Some of the conservation practices that we talk about that can help hold that nitrogen in the soil, things like cover crops can be effective, things like no-till, building up the organic matter in the soil, improving soil health. Those are kind of the strategies that we think about and focus on. One thing that's difficult with groundwater, though, is that groundwater is unseen once it leaves the surface, right? So, one of the difficulties with it is it might not be practices on your property that are causing the bulk of the issue. It might be practices on somebody else's property who doesn't have the groundwater issues that you're seeing in your well. So you can't necessarily tie what's happening directly above a well to what is going on in that well, because groundwater takes all sorts of different flow paths and it can sometimes be unexpected. So that's why it's so crucial to go out and figure out where are these sensitive areas. based on previous work that's been done in the region, we think we know kind of generally broad scale where they are, but it would be really nice to do a more detailed investigation of particular fields with their composition of soils and connection to groundwater and figure out, yes, we have to focus on this particular field or that particular area, rather than just saying, okay, all of St. Croix County, you have to make all of these changes.
Yeah. Great. I've got another question online. Are there any in-audience questions before I move on?
Was that high one for the residential?
Oh.
No, rather than a
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Maria, while we're waiting for that, if
Yeah.
I could just throw a plug in there that the well data, I don't know if that very high test necessarily even came from a agricultural well. In fact, I think most of the agricultural wells that we've taken out in the country are in relatively good shape. So I just wanted to make sure we understood that.
Sure.
So, y'all were talking about how, like, to Dr. Coleman Wasik's point about it's not just an individual's property that matters, it's kind of the whole network and system of farms. So how do you see y'all's organization working to build that sort of norm of behavior to use better practices to try and reduce the pollution? And are there, like, relationships y'all are working with other farmers to help encourage better practices, or are y'all kind of just taking we're going to give you the data, let you make up your own mind? What are y'all doing in that realm?
I could say to that, with working with agriculture and work with farmers, taking ownership of an issue, I think, is a big thing. And if you divorce yourself from it or separate yourself from it, you'll never get there. But if in agriculture we say, we need to be part of this solution, so we need to see what it is and give us good understanding of it, I think to try to move farmers to say, this is all of us. This is to make agriculture a better thing, because we all are trying to make a living in agriculture doing it. We need to create food production. We need to be profitable. All those things are important. So ownership, I think, is big. And this is part of what I see with farmer-led groups is they're going, okay, we want to be part of the understanding of the problem and the solution to the problem. And so they are taking ownership of kind of solutions here.
Well, and I think intrinsically, most of the guys that are producing will or have in their heart a want to do well, and a want to not harm others. So that being said, if there was and if I could coin the term magic bullet or one particular species that we could plant out in our fields that would ensure that we wouldn't have a nitrate problem, I guarantee you that most and all of them probably eventually would be putting that in their soil, after their crops are done, but we don't know that yet. There's so many things that we don't know. So on my particular farm, we're planting rye, cover crops, and we're letting it grow, and we're trying to build our soil structure, and my hope is that my soil, being the filter, I'm going to try to make that filter the best filter I can to filter the nitrates out before they get to the well or prohibit them from going down. But we don't know if that is the answer. In fact, I might be doing harm, and that's where the university comes in is in these trials and these things that we're doing with Dr. Jill is to find that out so we can get on the right path. And then once we find it and we prove it, well, now we can, serve it. So.
Well, I think that's a great place to stop. But I want to thank my panelists today. And again, thanks to all of you here online and in person. And again, great discussion.